Hi, I'm Paul Brodie, and I have a guest today. This is Danielle Schon.
Hi.
And we met at Frame Building 101. She was one of my students. I'm doing this today partly because I can't work in the shop. I'm still injured, so I want to update you on what happened. I fell off my Kickstarter. I was trying to start my bike and the lever didn't go down and I fell over. And I got around on a walker for 6 days. On day 5, we did the last Excelsior update video. And then a few of my friends said, well, you know, have you had x-rays? Have you had that checked out? So I thought, okay, I'm going to get up early Friday morning and I'm going to go to the hospital. So I got in my van. I drove myself to the hospital and got signed in, got x-rays. And the doctor came out and he says, Mr. Brodie, you've broken your hip. And I'm thinking, oh gosh, that means I can't go home today. So that was Friday. They operated on Saturday and they kicked me out Sunday. And now it's Saturday. So I'm into that for 6 days. So can't work in my shop. So I thought I would invite Danielle in here and we'll talk about what she does, frame building and teaching and things like that. So welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming here.
Happy to be here.
You took my course in 2014. That was basically a dozen years ago. And up until that time, you were working in Toronto as a welder. You had your own shop.
Yes.
Okay. I got that straight. I kind of had that in my mind. And so I would classify you as a welder, frame builder, artisan, and a teacher. Is that kind of all-encompassing?
Pretty all-encompassing, yes.
So was that your first frame that you made in the class, or had you made frames previous to that?
That was my first frame, and I didn't come to the course with the intention of like becoming a frame builder. I wanted to build a road frame for myself for road racing. And at the time I was working as a welder and riding bikes and racing bikes. So I figured it was a good kind of connection point of the knowledge and like a next step for me just personally. And then over the years, it kind of blossomed further into frame building.
One thing led to another.
Yes.
Okay. What happened after that is that in 2019, I broke my femur. I fell off a motorcycle and I broke my femur. And so after I got out of hospital, I knew I couldn't teach a class on my own. So I contacted Danielle and you were living out here then, weren't you? You weren't in Toronto at that time. You had snuck to the West Coast?
Yeah, I had just moved. We came out for a vacation in 2018 and we came by for a visit and mentioned that we were going to be moving in the spring. And that was kind of all around.
That was right around the time because that was March of 2019.
Yeah.
So I think you stayed in my guest house. Mm-hmm. That's how it worked.
Yep.
And
drove to the shop every day.
I was having trouble putting on my socks, I remember, because it turned out that my ankle was all swelled up in my foot, and I couldn't get to the doctor because I was teaching. Mm-hmm. Ended up I had a blood clot, so that wasn't good, but I got that fixed. So then, you were helping out at the course, and that was good. You were very helpful there. So I was wondering, is that kind of the spark in that 2 weeks that there was something that happened in your mind and you thought, oh, I could do this, or how did...
Definitely. It was a really interesting, like, full circle moment, especially being back in the exact same shop that I learned in, and it was the same course and the same structure, but being on, like, you know, the other side of the curtain kind of thing, which was really cool and a valuable experience after kind of working and building for several years at that point. And then it kind of made me realize that it was a potential next step. And then when Frame Building 101 was finally shut down, it seemed again like a logical next step. And you actually emailed me, and some friends of yours were looking to learn, and you asked if I was doing anything. And a person in town emailed me and said I had been working in town and knew you just through your bikes and repairs and stuff in a bike shop. Would you teach me? And I didn't have anything formal set up at the time, but it was kind of with your friends that you referred to me and this other person. Okay, I've kind of been through the motions and done all that. So if you want to come by, we'll figure it out. I can figure out how to kind of package this in 2 weeks. And so I went through 2 or 3 sets of people doing that very informally. A friend from Toronto came out, same thing. I'm not doing anything between school. Can you, teach me? And then after that, I was like, okay, maybe there's something here. And UFV had formally closed the program, and UBI in Portland had also at that time formally closed their program. So it went from like 2 institution-based frame building programs in Canada and the West Coast gone in the span of 2 years, which is sad overall. And then also just from a Canadian perspective of not having anything available in the country, I was like, I'll put something formal together. I'll put some dates on my website and people will sign up or they won't sign up. And if they don't, I will continue to do my other work. And that was almost 5 years ago and people are still signing up. So here we are.
That's good. So there was a bit of a vacuum and you were basically in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, and it seemed like a logical progression of like, had you been continuing to teach, I would probably never continue to, get to that point. But it seemed like, you moved on to your next step of the YouTube channel and kind of your next step of teaching and sharing your knowledge. So it seemed like a good kind of everybody's kind of moving to their next steps.
Yeah, the YouTube was Mitch's idea. I had someone whispering in my ear, and one day I said to Mitch, I said, someone's talking about YouTube. And he goes, that was me. And I go, gosh.
It's good to listen to those suggestions.
Yeah, it's good. So you're up in Squamish now, aren't you?
Yes.
And you have a shop. It's not huge, so you do a couple students at a time.
Yeah, 2 students.
2 students. Yeah, I used to do whoever signed up. I did 1, 2, 3, 4, and I think my favorite was 3 because, well, it was kind of a big shop and I was pretty busy going from one to the other. And when there was 4, sometimes that was a bit of madness.
A little chaotic.
Yeah, just running around. Paul, okay, hold on, I'll be over. Okay, so one of the things that I had a problem with was getting the students to finish by Friday at 4 p.m.
Yep,
and I thought
remember.
I thought we would talk about that.
Gold stars.
I set up a system of gold stars, and actually the gold stars are on the shelf over there. Can you grab can you see a little package? I would make these gold stars sound like they were really important. And so students really wanted to finish their frame at 4 p.m. Have you got a trick like that, or what do you do?
So I remember, I think in class, you telling us this story about one of your classes that everybody was just kind of gauging their pace off of everybody else and nobody was too worried. And then all of a sudden, maybe Thursday of week 2 comes around and everybody goes, uh-oh. And then, you were there till Friday at 11:30 p.m. and nobody was having a very good time at that point. And that's where the gold stars came from. Yeah. So I had one similar experience, and it just comes down to sometimes people have one speed, and it's challenging to figure out how to instill a sense of urgency in someone while they're also learning and kind of making critical decisions. And then also towing the line of, I don't want to just completely take over and do this for you. I'm trying to still allow you space to do this and learn, and you want to complete it yourself. Definitely a challenging line to walk. And I've learned a lot of, people management and time management and things like that. I would say almost every class, a new kind of shift or policy or tweak is made. I had exactly one class, I think the first year, that went to about 9 p.m. on the last Friday, and everybody was having a hard time past about 5 p.m. So I tried the sticker. I have everybody gets a certificate, and then I kind of, if we don't finish on time, you don't get the sticker on the certificate. Didn't land that well, but I'm pretty good now at the time management. Everybody gets a schedule printed out with the tasks, and I check in on the schedule a lot, and there's some time checks, and it's been pretty good since that has all happened. But it's an interesting thing to watch people's sense of urgency in a space when the clock is ticking, for sure.
Here's the gold stars right here. It's just from the dollar store. It's not like but I made them sound like they were really important. I had one student I was remembering just now that he finished at 410 and he asked for a gold star, and I said, no, silver. And he was not happy.
Well, should have boogied.
But that's okay. That's, I'm not gonna give out a gold star if he didn't finish at 4. So would you rather be building frames or teaching, or are they both about on the same level?
I like the variety.
Of teaching?
Of teaching and building and going back and forth between the two. And like, that's something in my whole kind of like self-employed career arc. I've always liked to have variety. So I'll get, really focused on personal projects for a while, and I do a lot of really complex builds. So sometimes when I finish a few back to back, I'm like a little burnt out on it. I need some kind of space from that like intensity. And then, teaching also has its challenges and structure and that type of thing, but it's very different. It's also like very social because everybody tends to be, the common thread, regardless of people's backgrounds, is that everybody's a huge bike nerd. So there's a lot of chit chat about bikes and, racing in the industry and builds and parts. And it's generally like very, especially working alone all the time, I don't have that constant socialization. So it's nice to do that for a little bit. And then after I kind of do a couple classes, that locks me into more of a 9-to-5 structure, which again, over time, I lose interest in a little bit. So then I go back to projects. So it's really nice to do both.
I like doing both.
Yeah, they have they both have their appeals and challenges, and it's nice to have that freedom to kind of go back and forth.
When you're going to build a frame, do you just grab some tubes and start building? Or do you make a full-scale drawing or use bike CAD?
I mostly use bike CAD. I do some drawing depending on what the project is. If it's things that are more complex and I'm not entirely sure of, I typically do scale drawings or cardboard aided design or that type of thing. I'm honestly not good enough at like 3D CAD to do that. And I'm a more tactile type of person. So it makes more sense in my brain to kind of figure those things out physically as I'm going along. But my typical build starts with bike CAD, either fit or components or the structure in between, basically as much as I can do in the CAD program. And then I start, fabricating from there. And if there's more kind of unique one-off features, I do those as I go along.
Have you ever been working on a frame and suddenly realized you've made a big mistake?
Oh, definitely.
Okay.
Experience.
That's not just me then.
Experience is the accumulation of mistakes, and that is something now that I tell students, and I tell a lot of stories in class. I remember you telling a lot of stories in class, mistakes are mostly correctable. I've definitely done stuff very early on where, you put a disc tab in the wrong place and you put a rotor in and it doesn't fit. And then, okay, well, learn that one the hard way. Like a lot of those types of things. So I try to relay those stories in a light and airy manner to my students. So it's like, I did this so you don't have to. You can learn from my mistakes. But it's really like frame building is such a challenging fabrication thing. It's such a unique fabrication thing. There's a lot of questions, especially around like components. You always got to stay up to date with new stuff. So you're always figuring things out. You're always trying to find numbers. You're always trying to, understand how things work together. So you're inevitably going to mess something up sometime, and that's fine. It's just you have to be smart enough to catch it and hopefully smart enough to fix it.
I think that's the difference in between an amateur frame builder and an experienced one, because everyone makes mistakes, but the experienced one knows how to get it back on track in the best way.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And it's also like just not letting it completely derail your project, of having the ability to, compartmentalize it a little bit and be like, well, mistakes happen and that's how I learn, and now I won't do that ever again, and move on. You can get upset about it for sure. I've definitely walked away from things time to time, but it's like the life of a fabricator and a maker and whatever. If you stop doing every time you mess something up, you're never going to do anything ever again. So.
Have you made any lugged frames, or are they mostly TIG welded or fillet brazed?
I made quite a few lugged frames. My probably favorite thing to do, and kind of like my specialty, I guess, is fully custom, like hand carved lugs, like fully fabricated.
I think I remember that.
So I do quite a lot of very intricate fabricated lugs, not quite just off the shelf stuff. I do like cast lugs. I've made plenty of frames with just lug sets. And I think they're, beautiful and have their merit. But my challenges with those is that you're typically, you're constrained by tube diameter and geometry a little bit, and you can maybe carve them up a tiny bit and zhuzh them, but you don't have that full creative freedom. And my favorite part of frame building is you can do whatever you want. So it's hard to start with a cast, object and go from there. So unfortunately, that means I have to fully fabricate all of my lugs, which is definitely a labor of love.
If you were going to build a frame and it wasn't a show bike, but just sort of a regular frame, how many hours might that take you?
I can do it in the fastest I've ever built a frame is about 24 hours. I don't really like working at that pace, to be honest, but I can build a very, very nice, regular, maybe road or gravel bike in about a week in the shop of just, a comfortable but consistent pace. But typically if I'm doing more in-depth projects like custom lugs or more in-depth fabrication or kind of off-the-cuff type things, it could be weeks, if not spread over several months of either consistently doing it or kind of having to pick away at it and then come back to something or figure something out, and just depends on, the levels.
So it takes quite a while.
Some time.
If you're TIG welding, are you using one of those auto darkening helmets or just the regular shield?
I like the auto darkening. I learned in welding school you have to learn with the shield. It's kind of like, I tell people it's like learning how to drive, manual versus automatic.
So you have to nod.
Yeah, you start manual, you'll have an easier time doing automatic later, whereas if you go in reverse, it's more challenging. So that's, in school we had to use manual hoods, and then same thing in machining, we had to use manual, like no digital calipers, it was all dial, so you learn how to read it properly. But I use digital stuff now, and the auto darkening hood, it's so convenient, it just goes.
Okay. In frame building, what is your worst experience? Is there something that kind of sticks out in your mind?
Worst experience.
If you can't think of something real quick, it's okay. I got a few more questions.
Let's come back to that one. Three-wheeler. Oh no, I don't want to talk about that guy. That's too dark. I'm not, bad customer experience. I've had a couple of challenging customer experiences, and like that's something too of being young and self-employed. Like you learn a lot of things the hard way sometimes. Of people say a lot of times, yeah, do whatever, it's totally fine. I trust, I'm happy with whatever you do, and then you do that, and they go, no, that's not how I wanted it. So you learn over time, and that's just youth and experience of managing customers, of putting specs on paper and things get signed off on, and I don't have any technical conversations kind of in person. Is that all gets put into an email. So everybody's in agreement what, the geometry is or how the cables are being routed, just even basic stuff of, well, why did you do it that way? Well, you said you didn't. You said do whatever. Yeah, but not that way. So that's a challenging space to be in when, you're self-employed and you're trying to make everybody happy and, but you don't want to lose money and, just a couple. I'm sure everybody's got a couple of those stories.
I had an experience once, and I can't remember the details, but we sat down and we were both saying yes, 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 yes.
Yeah.
And you think you're on the same page, and then you find out later that even though you're doing yes, yes, you each have a different concept in your mind.
Right.
So I've experienced that. So it's not easy being self-employed. No, it's not. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Or do you think about that kind of thing? Or
I would expect doing more of the same thing. I'm really happy with the kind of arc and the path that I've been on in the past few years. It feels very kind of logical and progressive, and my focus is always to continue, learning new skills and challenging myself. And I don't really like being stagnant, and I get honestly a little bit kind of bored after doing just the same thing over and over after more than like a couple years. My most recent project, actually, that I'm just getting off the ground is now going to be tube importing and distribution across Canada, because there's not really any steel tube distributors in the country. And with trade and tariff challenges, it feels like a really good time to have a better supply opportunity for Canadian builders. And hopefully, if there's more supply opportunity, it can remove some of the barrier to entry, and then more people can get into it and continue the craft and like the growth of the community in the country. Because there's been quite a lot of like this post-COVID, I think, boom of small builders in Canada specifically. BC for sure, there's like dozens more now popping up all the time, which is great. And you need it to sustain your community and the craft. So hopefully in 5-10 years, I'll have a really well-established distribution company for Canadian frame builders.
a big warehouse with your name up at the top. Yeah. Okay, I got one more question, and then after that we'll talk about the bikes you've made. What bugs you most about the bicycle industry right now?
How much time you got?
Well, we don't need a huge rant, but if you got something in the top of your head, something that's bugged you recently.
I think a lot of customers and just kind of consumers and cyclists can probably agree with this, of just like the over capitalism of it all, of like new frames every season, and the geometries swing so hard back and forth from like, we went so far off the deep end with like longer, slacker, lower, and like now it's coming back. And it's like the impact of big level marketing on a small community is really challenging to manage as a frame builder, because you're impacted by all these like trends and swings, and a lot of times like just marketing fluff and lingo, and people are asking for these things. You mentioned like yes, this type of thing of like, sometimes people are asking for these marketing buzzwords where you're like, you don't need that. Like nobody needs that. And it's challenging to manage that and keep up with standards and specs and new fixtures and learning new components at such an accelerated rate.
Are the magazines, well, maybe not the magazines, but because often it's on the internet now, but are they still having a big influence on how the trends move?
I think so.
Because what I'm thinking about is when I was building, and it was, I think, in the 90s, and there was mountain bike action, and they decided that the cable routing all had to go up top.
Right.
And if you had it, after they, established that, and they had a lot of power back then, you had to move your cable routing, even though sometimes going under the bottom bracket, that was fine.
Right.
It didn't have a problem.
Yeah.
So that was one of the things that I remember from back then. They were very powerful.
Yeah. I think that like it's that, but just amplified because of how inundated we are with like media and social media, and it doesn't stem from like the desire to make the community or the product necessarily better. It's to like hold visual space in like the social media landscape, and it's just like putting out content for the sake of putting out content, which again, as a small artisan self-employed builder, I don't want to spend my time doing that. But if you don't, you have to stay relevant. But the more I'm doing that, it's taking away from the time in the shop, and it's like you're subject to these kind of like media implications of the greater industry, but with at 1/100th of the scale and capacity. So it just doesn't make sense, and it's truly not a sustainable thing as a one-off, small artisan business. So that's probably like one of the biggest challenges is just keeping up with the media.
Well, thank you for those thoughts. Okay, well, it's been great asking you these questions, and we're going to talk about the bikes you've made and get into that. Thank you, Danielle.
Thank you, Paul.
All right, one of the bikes that I like a lot of Danielle's is the track bike. I didn't realize it was a track bike. I just remembered it from the Sacramento show, and it was pink and silver. So you built it as a track bike, and you raced it for several years.
Yeah, that was my personal track bike that I raced. Track, like velodrome track, and a lot of like fixie crits were really popular at the time. So it's like a very aggressive crit track geometry, and I raced it for quite a few years. And that was my first bike that I built to bring to a show, and that was the NABS in Sacramento. So it was an opportunity for me to do something. I knew that was going to be my first time in a room full of a bunch of other frame builders. So I was like, I have to do something that's going to be interesting and challenging and hopefully stand out. And I was
that's the word I was thinking, stand out.
I was so nervous going to that show because I'd never like really presented my work to the world type of thing. And I was like, I knew the eyes that were going to be on it.
I know what you're talking about.
I was so worried that people were going to be in there just looking at all of the fillets and everything, and were going to say that it, wasn't good enough or too weird or all of those types of things. But that was like, it had a really, really good reception to it, and that was like the imagery and they're kind of like the vibe of it is it's supposed to be like donut inspired just for fun, because I thought it would be fun and cool. And that was my first time actually ever fully hand fabricating lugs, which was again a very challenging but interesting experience. And then once I got all the way through that project and realized, okay, I'm able to do this with some success, and I understand the process a little bit more now, and I know how I can do this better next time and now apply it to more projects. That really like verified and kind of launched my personal arc of frame building, of what I like to do and what I like to focus on. This is a cargo bike that I built. That was actually my first cargo bike, and again, just like kind of a question mark of something that I always wanted to do, but never really had an opportunity. And then I had a friend who was really interested in having a cargo bike built. So it's a good opportunity to collaborate with someone a little bit. And the big thing about this bike is, so it's for a husband and wife couple who the husband is about 6'1" and the wife is about 5 feet tall. And the big stipulation was that they wanted to take it bike packing in the summer with their dog on the front, but it had to be fit so they could both potentially ride it. It was mostly for him, but just in case, she needed to bring the bike somewhere or ride it or whatever, is that she also had to be able to ride it. So that was a big point in the design. And I accomplished that through the dropper is, able to move the saddle height up and down, and kind of the lower sloped, not quite mixedy style, but definitely the lower top tube. Because of the lower top tube and the dropper, I couldn't put a bottle on it. So then it presents this interesting question of like, okay, what do you do for bottles and the cargo and the bags and that type of thing? And that's where I got the double top tube, kind of double stack bottle idea, because it keeps the stack and the standover super low, but doesn't sacrifice any of the functionality.
Is that a battery there, or
That's two.
is that just
It's
storage?
frame bags. It's just
Frame
storage.
bags,
So there's
okay.
two, basically, kind of two top tubes double stacked just for the visual, and then it's the intention for the cargo bike. I mean, the customer he rides it all the time in the city and in town, but it's for bike packing. So we wanted to absolutely maximize storage space. So there's the main triangle bag, and then the little front triangle bag under the cargo deck is for all the dog stuff for when they go dog packing.
Okay, I see here that you've been making some hubs. Are
Yes.
those the hubs that got used on the,
disco bike?
well, you call it unicycle here, but
Yes.
I'm looking at this here. There's her bike's on the front of a magazine of bicycling. That's a bit of a coup, I think. Okay, so those are two custom hubs.
Yes.
And this is, it's not really a unicycle because there's two wheels, but you do tricks on it, or what?
So it's called a circus bike, which is similar to a BMX bike, but it's basically for like circus performance and tricking and that type of thing. Less like BMX in that they ride it off of stuff and jump and shred on things. It's more for like, bar spins and riding backwards, and you're standing on the frame and like that kind of more performance oriented thing. This project came of, I just wanted to see if I could make some hubs, like just purely out of curiosity. I went to school for manual machining. I have a lathe and a mill in the shop, and it again seemed like something that was in my capacity, but I don't have a real reason to do it. And then trying to be logical about it and, not give myself too hard of a task of, okay, I'll start with a basic front hub. Like it's just a hub. There's no brake mounting on it. My original thought was a track bike. But then for the rear hub, I was like, okay, I got to do either threads for, a free hub body or a freewheel. And then, okay, can I do, even a 6-bolt rotor seems kind of additionally challenging. So what's the most straightforward functional hub that I could think of? And it's a unicycle hub because it's a direct drive square taper. And from a fabrication standpoint, I was like, okay, I think I understand all the steps. I have the capacity to do this. What's the only thing I can build a direct drive square taper around? Basically a unicycle. Okay, how do I make this a little bit more interesting than just bringing a unicycle? And that's kind of how it, escalated from there, let's say. So
was this for somebody, or?
No, this was purely for show and just a really fun. Again, we were talking about how do you're going to a room in a weekend full of people who are able to build beautiful bicycles. There's 1,000 beautiful bicycles in this room that are made by extremely skilled and smart and creative people. So how do I stand out in that space, which is hard to do sometimes. I've brought some really nice bikes to shows and they just get lost in the crowd. And then,
I know that feeling.
What do people, what catches someone's attention more than a disco ball? Right? And we had a spotlight on it at the show, and it was throwing sparkles all over the aisle, and it definitely caught, it was kind of, it's the hook to get people in. And then I say, hey, while you're here, I manually machined all these components. And then people go, what? And then you kind of, then you pull them into the rest of the story. Mm-hmm. But it's the biggest challenge is getting people into the booth when there's 1,000 other like amazing things to look at while you're there.
On the spoke calls, did you mark them out manually, or do you have a rotary table?
I have a rotary table. That was probably one of the things I was the most scared to do because it was one of the last operations, and I was probably 8 hours deep on one hub at that point. I started with 4-inch aluminum bar stock, so just turning it down hours. And I wrote out all of the operations in order on a notepad. And I thought about it, and I was like, I have one shot to do this.
Good.
Also, work holding, at some point, I was like, I'm going to lose the ability to clamp this. So I was like, I have to really, really, really think this through so I don't get to a point where I cut something and go, uh-oh,
I can't hold it
I can't hold this
anymore.
anymore. So the spoke holes were the last thing to do. I did the math. I have quite a small rotary table, so I didn't have a lot of room to actually clamp it. So I had to fabricate a thing to clamp it to the rotary table.
An arbor?
Like kind of an arbor through the center.
Yes, I'd call that an arbor.
And I did the math. I marked it out, marked each little spot out with Sharpie, and then I did just a dry run with the table and making sure my bit was lining up with the Sharpie. I think I did that 3 times before I finally went for it. And I was like, okay, I think it's all going to line up, because I was like, if I mess this up, it's, you could probably save it, but it's a scary point of no return. So, but now that I've done it, I was like, okay, that actually wasn't that bad, and it lined up. And then I had a friend build the wheels, and my actual concern the whole time was, I'm going to make this whole thing and then send it over to the wheel builder, and he's going to be like, these don't go. Like, I'm put the spokes in them, and it's not like, I can't build these. This is too messed up. But he said they built up totally fine, and the tension was totally fine, and they worked. And I was like, okay, cool. Look at that. Okay,
the bike I'm looking at here is that the one over there?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so that's electric bike.
Yes.
And you took that down to the MADE show?
In Portland last year, yes.
Yep. And it got well received, or?
Yeah, I think people were pretty curious about it. And again, I was trying to do something. Shimano sponsored the show last year, and they asked me to build an e-bike around their kind of motor system. And I wanted to figure out how I could do it in a way that didn't look like a typical e-bike, because my thoughts on, most e-bikes kind of look all the same. They have the big battery on the down tube, and there's wires everywhere. And it's this interesting intersection of it needs the functionality to work, and it has a very specific functionality, but I want to make it more interesting within these constraints. So my idea for the bike is I wanted it to emulate like kind of a French country cruiser, like really classic cruiser style bike with like the wood, wine crate on the back kind of vibe. And that gave me somewhere to hide the battery. So the battery's in the box on the back, because they do make a rack mounted battery. And that let me preserve more of this interesting and classic frame shape. And quite a few of the responses that I got were people would look at it, and then they would see the motor mounted in the middle, and they would go, oh wait, it's an e-bike, but where's the battery? And then I could kind of show them again the thought process. And
the wires went through the frame.
It's fully internally routed from the bars all the way to the motor and the battery, which was extremely challenging.
Is that extra work doing that?
It's a significant amount of extra work.
I know, I can imagine.
I really, really, truly love the aesthetic, and all of the internal routing that I do is fully closed. Like, it's fully routed with like a stainless hydro line. So it's not just cables flapping around in the tubes. So it's quite a lot of work. And I fabricated the stainless box on the back as well, fully from sheet, because there was nothing available that was, again, a reasonably compact size, fits on the seat stays, doesn't interfere with the pedaling motion, fits the battery and the cables, but isn't too bulky. So the only answer was to completely fabricate something from sheet metal. And then I had a friend, sign painter friend, paint it kind of in this style of the one side is supposed to look like it's like a case of cans, like a case of, water cans or beer cans, and it's all branded. So just like another point of opportunity for creativity and doing something a little bit, more visually interesting and fun.
Okay, now I'm looking at this bike here. This is... It kind of looks like a mountain bike, and it's got a bag on the front. Is there anything specific about this bike?
Yeah, so this is just like a very straightforward gravel bike. I do build normal things sometimes. I like building normal frames. I'm happy to build. This is just like a round town gravel shredder. with, I think it has clearance for 38s on it. So it's not getting into hardtail range. It's just like a nice gravel bike. It was built around, it was right when the Shimano GRX came out. So that was my first like kind of hydro disc gravel frame. So it's just, the geometry comes more from, I have like a cyclocross racing background, so it's like a little bit more cyclocross inspired, but with the newer gravel component and tire clearances.
And the frame is made out of what?
It's steel, and that frame is raw. I just clear coated it, so you can see the fillets.
I thought maybe it was stainless or something like that.
No, that one's steel. It's just got a nice buff before it got the clear coat on it.
Okay.
I brought this bike to the Philly Bike Expo originally, and all of the lugs and the dropouts on this bike are made out of Damascus steel that I forged myself.
Okay.
And again, just wanted to I wanted to see if I could do it. I wanted to see if it was possible, because I had seen some builders use Damascus in like a finishing decorative like applique style on a frame before. You can buy Damascus billets online that, you know, knife makers and stuff make, that you can then go cut your own products out of or whatever. And I was curious if I could make a lug out of it, because I thought it would be very beautiful if it was possible. But I didn't know how to forge. So there's actually a blacksmith in town. His name is Eric Gindelsberger. And I reached out to him to see if he would teach me how to forge and kind of explain the project, and said, I want to make a few Damascus billets that I can then further fabricate into lugs. So he basically taught me how to forge. We made some Damascus billets.
In his shop? In
his shop, yeah. He's about 20 minutes away from me.
And he's got is it called the fire? Or
he's got a forge and a power hammer and a 20-ton hydraulic press, which you need for basically compressing all the layers of steel together, because you use two different kinds of steel, a high carbon steel and a low carbon steel, and then you compress them in alternating layers. And then later when you etch it, the carbon etches black, and then the other steel kind of stays brighter and more polished, and that's how you get your pattern. So I made all of these billets, and then I cut them down into sheet, and then I basically formed them into tube, and I seam welded the tube, and then I mitered them and welded them together into a lug blank, and then I carved a lug, and then I built a track bike out of it.
Sounds like a little bit of work.
I called it the 100-hour lug project. I'm pretty sure it took me longer than 100 hours, but it sounded good, so that's what I settled on. And then I made the dropouts, the fork dropouts, the cast, the fork crown as well, all from the Damascus pieces. And it was one of those projects where I literally just had a kind of vision in my mind of what I wanted it to look like. I worked through the process of doing it and thought, okay, I kind of know all the hiccups. I'm going to have to do a lot of annealing because it's going to be really hard, and I'm going to have to bend it, and it's going to be stressed. So maybe when I bend it, it's going to break. So I really thought through all of the fabrication process. But it was one of those things that until I was probably about 80% through the process of doing it, that it turned the corner, and I was like, okay, I think it's working the way that I think it's going to work, and it's going to all come together. Because it was one of those things that I might, have this understanding of metal and this understanding of annealing and stress relieving and that type of thing. But then when I do it real time, maybe I weld it together and it just cracks, because I don't have high level tooling. I'm just kind of doing it with a torch in the shop. So it was a really fun and challenging project. And I just wanted to make a really beautiful track bike, stripped away of components, and it being about the frame fabrication and the craft of it. And I'm really happy with how it turned out. It was an obscene amount of work.
Is the bike for you, or did it go somewhere else?
No, it's for me. It's on the wall in my shop. It does conveniently fit me if I ever want to race track again. But it's mostly just kind of for the love of the craft and the project and the opportunity to do it.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for all that. I mean, you've done things that I haven't done, and vice versa probably, but it's very good. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Mitch and I like coffees. Please like, subscribe. See you next time.